Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more NewPub talk. Today we're skipping the splash screen and we're going straight into talking. I'm here with Alexander and Adam S. Furman. So Alexander, is your last name Helena or is it Helene?
Helene, and it's a pen name. So
it's a pen name, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Not the real last name, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's a great pen name because you're Greek. Yes?
How'd you guess? No, a little fun there. A Helene, not
yeah.
A little.
All right.
Because the first initial, pretty dorky, but.
Yeah, so Alexander's the author of Last Ancestor, which you can find right now on Amazon. I'm going to go ahead and link it up. Adam is an author of a number of short stories, and you have an upcoming book. So I'm going to go ahead and link your website, and so you can hop on his mailing list if you want to keep up to date with that. Upcoming book is called
Collateral Damage. Yep.
All right. So what's that book going to be about?
Collateral Damage is about a desperate father who must save his son amidst a kaiju robot attack in the city. So
great, giant fighting robots. We had that on the stream a couple of weeks ago, so that's great. I love it.
You can never have too many. Really.
Yeah, I was saying that with Brian, right?
Yes.
Yep, he's my editor. So
great.
So he's keeping me in tip-top shape.
Okay, good. All right, so I've called this stream "Breaking the Law." And know that we won't be covering any Judas Priest today.
Oh man.
But I thought a good place for us to start, because I have two attorneys here that are also lawyers, is the misperceptions that people have as far as how the legal system works, at least here in the United States, but also abroad, because a lot of people in the US have no idea how other legal systems work as well. And also what lawyers do. I think people have a rather fantastical idea. I mean, a lot of kids who are in college are like, I really want to be an attorney. I'm like, do you know what that really means? Because I have a lot of family that are attorneys and things like that. I'm not an attorney myself. I like to read legal opinions. I'm a weirdo like that, but it's a lot of technical writing and knowledge that is very appealing to me. And I like to keep up with it. I first became interested, just to talk more about myself, became interested in law when I went to a seminar on intellectual property law, because I felt like I needed to know this as an artist, as a musician at that time. And that's when I first figured out that like things are really a lot more complicated and vague, but much more vague than what you think they are. Anyway, what do you guys think?
I don't think you could have said it any better. I think the words complicated and vague kind of sum it up, because you think you're going to be getting some kind of clear cut rule. What they always tell you is called the black letter of the law when you're in law school, but when you actually get into practice, nothing is, to overuse the term, nothing is black and white really, and it almost makes one wonder if things are done like that intentionally to allow for different circumstances that you can't anticipate, but you also have to wonder cynically sometimes if that's not to keep lawyers in business. So there's always a little bit of that.
Well, I think the way bar associations are run is mostly to keep lawyers in business. At one point in time, you didn't go to law school to be a lawyer. Like people are like, I wonder what Abraham Lincoln was like in law school. It's like, he didn't go to law school. No. He didn't go to law school in the 19th century.
Nope.
Anyway, what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole batch of lawyers coming out of law school today, and they're criticized for not being practice ready. And part of it is to your point, Abraham Lincoln, he didn't go to law school. What you did is you apprenticed, and then eventually you'd go before a judge who would swear you in. And even if you're the best law student out there, if you haven't clerked during your in between semesters or something, there's a couple exceptions where you can see a courtroom when you're in law school, but you usually don't. And so when you start to practice law, you've never seen a courtroom, and it takes you about 2-3 years to get going.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now, I will say California is actually a state where you can pass the bar and become a licensed attorney without going to law school by being an apprentice. It's actually a little bit of a different route. There's a couple states that still allow that. You don't have to have a JD degree in California to pass the bar. You just have to print. I don't know all the requirements, but you could do it. And some people do it. And I think I've met at least one or two attorneys that was the way that they got into it, is that they were paralegals originally, which is it's a different thing. It's a different certification. And then they apprenticed and passed the bar and became practicing attorneys.
I like that. And I wonder if more states should do that, because I couldn't agree with Adam more. So we were talking a little bit before the show about how so many lawyers never see the inside of a courtroom, and that a lot of people think that most lawyers are in court all the time. My first job out of law school, I actually was in court all the time. And Adam's point about most lawyers not being ready, practice ready, is true, because they load you up on a lot of theory in the law school. And I guess the idea is that through the course of internships and jobs and things like that, you'll get your reps. But I tell you, I mean, I think I learned more the first month of getting chewed out by judges and magistrates what actually practicing was like than I did, all that fancy civil procedure and theoretical contract law was great, but not so much when you don't know what form to file, and how to who you're supposed to write the check to and all of that. So there's all this practical stuff that you just don't get. So I think apprenticing would be the best way to go.
Yeah, civil.
Yeah, and Alex,
go ahead, Adam.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say that to Alex's point, a lot of that stuff is like community based, like it's community specific. So I mean, you go in a courtroom in Texas, the community standards there are going to be completely different than Oklahoma, Illinois. I mean, and even by county. So really getting your foot in the door with the local attorneys is where it's at.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that if you're studying civil procedure doesn't just vary by state. It actually varies by locality, depending on the way that court happens to process documents or something like that. So, I mean, that's just how it is.
It's not supposed to, but it does.
It does. Yeah. It varies in practice, I should say.
Yeah.
So civil procedure varies in practice. But I also think, like, I think there's also, I know Alexander and I have mentioned or talked about this in passing. I think there's a lot of lawyers out there who really are actually not competent. There's this belief that in the mystical thing called law degree that makes a lawyer good. And there's a lot of lawyers who actually don't know what they're doing, especially when it comes to civil procedure. And I'm talking, I've watched some very public cases recently where attorneys were forgetting, they were forgetting to file paperwork on time, and they had weeks to do it. And so they were asking the judge, like, can we do this? It's like, it's not a good strategy,
Yeah, they don't teach you that. Deadlines are very important. And I mean, I don't know. I've seen enough of that. I'd love to hear what Adam has to say. I don't know how much courtroom stuff you've done, Adam, but I mean, you see stuff like that all the time. It's just basic, like people not even showing up for court dates. I mean, I've been in the position, I've been calling the other side's attorney kind of as a professional courtesy. You have a court date. Your client's going to lose if you don't show up, and I can't get through to them. And I mean, that would happen all the time. It was unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if that's so much competency as it's just basic time management skills. I guess that goes hand in hand, but it was pretty wild. Pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. For my own experience, I got to be honest, I'm more transactional. So I'm a corporate attorney. And so I'm in-house, and I don't really get to see the courtroom, but I do.
Hey, you're missing nothing.
Well, I do. We do like pro bono. Sometimes do some pro bono stuff or some stuff for some outside work to help with individuals in the community. And so I have seen the courtroom, and the first time I was in the courtroom, the judge ended up recessing the court because opposing counsel was late. So to that extent, hey, I was in her good graces. But as far as the civil procedure, I mean, honestly, I couldn't tell you. I would know that when I get a piece of paper that has a caption on it that I need to consult it, but I don't know. I wouldn't know it off, in the back of my mind what needs to be filed when or what the timeline is.
It's complicated.
But I would know to go look at the civil procedure, All
right. So here's a comment from Harvard.
Yeah, at least check out the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the saying that a man who defends himself in court has a fool for a lawyer true?
I guess it depends on who he's hired, or who he potentially could have hired. Maybe it's for the best. Some of the people I've seen, but
yeah, I would say it really depends on. So even if you're an attorney, it's good to hire a lawyer for things because that lawyer will have a more objective view of what's going on. And that's partly because when you're in it, you have all the information, but an external observer is able to understand what's relevant and what's not. It's like, you may know that this guy's lying, but I can't show that this guy's lying, And so that's a thing. So even if you are a lawyer, if it's a significant enough thing, it's probably good to hire a lawyer. Now, I did say something in a video the other week where I basically said, it could actually cost a big corporation a lot of money if users actually exercise their right to mediation. So that's in a lot of terms of service. Like, you have to go to mediation before you can, file an actual lawsuit or something like that. So if you actually went to mediation, I was like, if you just got a friend who was a lawyer to do any kind of basic paperwork and it just went to mediation and that was the end of it, it would actually cost the company a lot of money. And so if everybody did that, this cost could actually spiral out of control. It's not free for them to go to mediation. It's very far from free, actually. No. So it costs thousands and thousands of dollars in there to pay their attorneys to do it. And if a lot of people actually exercise that right, their in-house legal departments wouldn't be able to handle the burden. They'd have to start hiring other people to do all that. It would actually be a really significant legal expense.
Yeah, and depending on the terms of the actual, mediation or arbitration agreement, they may be responsible for paying the mediators in every case too. So if we're talking about a big company versus, an individual, the little guy doesn't have to usually pay for the, for jams or for whatever other arbitration mediation service it is. So that could be a huge blind spot. Goes to your point about competence, though, David, because, who the heck wrote these terms of service? Like, didn't somebody review them?
Yeah. I don't know if they thought about that. It's like, lawsuits can be expensive, so we'll make them go to mediation. It's like, mediation's not really free, guys. Like, it's still kind of expensive to go through mediation. This is another one that I said that and people are like, oh, everyone's going to lose all kinds of money when the judge just orders you to pay Google's legal expenses. It's like, it doesn't work that way. I'm not even saying you before you even go to like a motion to dismiss, you wouldn't even go that far. You just go to mediation and see what happens.
Yeah. I think the objective there, though, is to you go to mediation or arbitration to avoid any type of precedent against those whatever you're suing over. Yeah. And so they probably did some risk assessment and came to the conclusion that, hey, we'd rather spend a premium on making whoever quiet than actually coming up with some binding precedent that can go across our industry.
Now that's an interesting.
It's private too.
Yes, and it's private, so it doesn't show up as a judgment or anything like that. Now this is an interesting one, and it's related to what we're just talking about. What do you think would be better? Absolutely no copyright laws or extremely draconian copyright laws? And the way it's related is that people ask me, "Hey, here's this copyright lawsuit of did this guy steal this guy's song?" And I'm like, how do you think it's going to turn out? I'm like, just roll the dice, man. There is no consistency when it comes to the way copyright cases pan out, especially with music. You have somebody suing. I remember, who was it? Joe Satriani was going to sue Coldplay because their song sounded really a lot like his. But it became very apparent that it was just Pachelbel's canon, right? So he was using chords that had been used for hundreds of years and a melody that just was like the root of the chord. It's like, I think they settled it out of court so he could get a writing credit and some percentage of royalties. It was very similar song, but I guarantee you like 100 or 1,000 people have written that song in the last 300 years before. So it's just a dice roll. You never know. Yeah. And there's just no consistency with the judgments at all. There's very little precedent that ever gets set for that.
And who's getting screwed in this particular scenario? Johann Pachelbel, because like everybody rips off that piece. But no, that's I remember we were reading cases about like George Harrison was being sued by oh gosh, I forgot who it was, but My Sweet Lord was claimed to be a ripoff of I think an older song, and you end up having a judge who has to sit there and listen and make a determination on the merits of the music. And I mean, I'm pretty sure this judge was a smart guy, but he didn't go to school and study music theory, and he has to sit there and make a determination about, is the chorus substantially similar, and it's like,
which is something very technical. It's very technical. You need actual musical training to understand that. I have a degree in music, and for me, it's really easy to say, this is similar, this is not similar. Even if it's really similar, I'm like, yeah, but this is a really, really common thing. So at what point is it just like, blues chords are blues chords? You can't rip off blues chords.
Yeah. You can't copyright the 145. Like,
now, I mean, there's a whole nother discussion I've had with other people too on the channel, where YouTube will allow you to copyright claim almost anything. You could sample another person's song and then come up with a content ID for it and like steal their song. It's happened a bunch of times. It's a whole legal morass trying to deal with that too. Because like, do you sue the company that did the copyright claim on your video? Like, how do you resolve this? Because they're just taking your ad revenue. They're just taking your money. So anyway, do you guys have answers for the question? What's better, absolutely no copyright laws or extremely draconian copyright laws?
Do you want to go at them?
Yeah, I would. I usually come down on the side of more stricter copyright laws, but I would say that if it had to be an extreme either way, I would say no copyright laws to let the ideas flourish and let the best man or woman win.
Alexander, do you have an opinion?
I'm going to do the lawyer thing and say it depends. I think somewhere down the middle, I think is good, because you want people to be able to police what they have created. Because what I think a lot of people, the question I get asked a lot is, how do I get a copyright? It's like, well, you create something. The second you create it,
it's copyright.
The standard is it has to be fixed on a type of medium. I mean, is that a piece of paper? Mm-hmm. Is that a CD? Is that a video like this?
Phonograph.
Recording? And you have a copyright. Registering allows you to do certain things. Like, I think you need to, I'm not a copyright attorney, but I took some coursework. With the registered copyright, you can bring a lawsuit.
Yeah, it's a piece of evidence for the lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's because the Library of Congress gives you so if you guys don't know how to do this, you don't have to file your stuff with the Library of Congress. I do, as just in case. It's not that expensive. So you could file it with them. They'll send you a piece of paper that just registers that they've received the work and it's on file. So if you ever had to go to take a lawsuit, you could bring that piece of evidence, say the Library of Congress has this on file. They received it on this date. They filed it on this date. And the defendant published their work after this date. Clearly, it was a theft of this. So if it's really
statutory damages too.
Yeah. As opposed to.
That's another thing. Yeah, statutory damages with that is so. LimeWire got a judgment against them for more money than exists. I don't know if you guys remember that. Do you guys remember this?
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, no.
So this has to do with I try to remember all the technical things, but it had to do with the location that you end up having a lawsuit take place in matters. And so what it ended up happening is that they were claiming every violation, a statutory damage that was written in the law for some monetary amount. I don't remember how much it is, but it on its surface, it wasn't big. It was like $50, right? For every single violation. And there was like billions of violations, right? Because people were downloading all kinds of crap off LimeWire. So the total amount of money that they sued was like somewhere it was like $800 trillion or something like that. It was more wealth than exists in the world. They got sued for by the Recording Industry Association of America. It was just because some lawyer went through it and be like, well, we can ask for the statutory maximum for every single copyright violation. We have evidence that 1.5 billion downloads occurred. So there we go.
Nope.
I mean, technically you're right, but you're gonna have to find like a new solar system to get money from to pay that one off.
If the judgment, I think it was just they just immediately filed for bankruptcy, and the assets went into bankruptcy court where they divvied up the assets to whoever.
Yeah, and I think that was the point, probably.
Yeah,
I mean, they weren't expecting to get paid.
Yeah. Now, my opinion is, do we want extremely draconian or do we want none? So I prefer some because the benefit of a court system is you have an ultimate judger, right? You have somebody that if you can't decide it in your community, you can't settle a conflict between you and another person. There's somebody that you can finally go to and say, this is how it is. And you can get a judgment. And that's actually a big value, I think, economically. I think it's really underrated by a lot of libertarians is the value of being able to have a judgment in a court system that everybody agrees on. In a totally free society, in an anarchist society, it's very difficult to get that without having some other kinds of large, weird social support. Like everybody in the community is going to ostracize you if you don't recognize this judgment. It's like, well, what if they don't agree with the judgment? Right? Yeah. Because that happens all the time. There's communities that are completely divided about who was guilty and who wasn't guilty, or, how much damages should be awarded for this or that. So I think some is good. And if the extreme was none, or if it was draconian, right now I wouldn't describe what we have right now as draconian, believe it or not. A lot of people think it is. I would say none. And I think culture would probably respond to that in a certain way. If there was no way for you to sue somebody for violating copyright, culture would change the way that it pays artists so that artists could actually produce the art that people wanted, and they wouldn't be able to enforce compensation if somebody were to, like, say, republish their book or something like that. There we go. From Kaku, YouTube and its copyright rule certainly has become like Face Off, all guns pointing at each other. What a predicament. Yeah, there's been some really kind of scary stories over the last couple of years. A guy who had a song, a very popular song with like millions and millions of views, had there's actually a whole business, there's a whole industry, I should say, of companies, and they're mostly in like the Eastern Bloc, and I don't want to, if there's anybody watching that's Slavic, this is not an insult towards you. Just all these companies are in like, Czechoslovakia, or they're in Albania or somewhere like that. They specialize in stealing copyrighted material off of YouTube. So they create a content ID, and then they steal somebody's song and just collect all the revenue from that. And because the process takes so long to resolve, they end up getting all of the money before they have to dissolve the company and get banned from YouTube. So there's actually a little industry that is entirely parasitic and just steals copyrighted things. So this guy had a really popular song stolen, and it took 3 months to actually get his ownership over his own song that he produced and released on YouTube back to him, including like legal he had to take legal action. It cost him money to do this. And the company that they paid, they never recovered the money from, because the company just disappeared or dissolved into the same 5 Albanians making a new company to do the same thing.
And like, what are you going to do? Go into the Balkans to find them? Like, you're out of luck. You're basically out of luck. Yeah, we're going to send an expedition to Bulgaria to get my money. Yeah, okay. Get back to me.
It adds up. So if you do a claim anyway, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to the question. What seems to me is that the YouTube copyright laws, it seems like they're weaponized more than anything. I don't think it's really about who owns what. I think it's about shutting people up. Again, that might just be cynical me, but that's what it looks like from the outside as one who's not really on YouTube.
Yeah, that's part of the result of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. One of the I don't know if I even want to call it controversial. Everyone hates this legislation and the way that it played out, because it was written by a bunch of guys who didn't know anything about the internet way back in the year 2000. The year 2000. So it nothing in it makes any sense for like a modern internet. And YouTube, of course, they need to be a neutral arbitrator and deal with this law. So that involves allowing people to claim copyright on things that they say they have a copyright on. So you go to YouTube and you're like, I own this song, and the YouTube's like, okay. They just do it.
Yeah.
And then the person,
like, sir, that's Led Zeppelin.
I'll just go through the order for anybody that doesn't know it. So let's say I have a song, I write a song and put up on YouTube. Someone puts a copyright claim on my song. I dispute that claim. What YouTube does is they show the dispute to the person who filed the claim, and then they can decide whether that is valid or not. which makes total sense. You know, so it's like, wait, it's like, okay, this person's disputing your claim. It's like, well, I've decided that that's invalid, rejected. So you just click a button and reject it, and then they're like, hey, well, this person rejected your dispute of the claim. It's like, what do you do? What's the next step? The next step is you have to file like legal paperwork in order to prove that it's yours. You have to go through 3 steps, and then finally they'll actually look at it and decide if it's the way that it is. I don't know who decided that was how it was going to be, but that's how it is.
I mean, one remedy is the next step is you show up to the person making the claim's house and hand them a guitar and say, play it, prove it. But have you actually had to go through that? Have you had to go through that process, David, yourself?
So I've had to do it with things that were fair use, not my own things. Now I hear the horror stories about my own things, but nobody's going to bother claiming a piece that I have up on YouTube that has like 1,000 views. It's just not worth your time to deal with that. You go and you search the most popular things and you try to come up with claims for that. There's dudes who would say sample an orchestra part for Beethoven's Fifth and make like a terrible hip hop song out of it, put that up, and then they can create a content ID out of that and then use that to claim other videos as well. It's very, I do this, so it probably sounds more complicated than it is, but it's one of those things. And then I go through the steps to dispute the claim, and all that time I don't make any money on it. The people ask, why don't you do more score analysis videos? Why don't you do more music analysis videos? Like, I can't make any money on it. It takes so long to get through the copyright claim process that by the time you finish it, all of the views for the video have occurred. You get kind of a spike and then it trails off. Only with really certain kinds of content do I consistently get views like month after month. So usually if I make a video like, let me analyze, I'm going to analyze a Rush song. Here's the chords. And so we're going to listen to the Rush song, obviously, because we need to hear it to know what the hell I'm talking about. So then, Rush has a copyright claim on it. It's fair use. Maybe they release it because they know that it's just an analysis video, but that process by itself can take up to 30 days and all the views in the video have happened by then. And that's not because Rush is bad. It's just the claim happens automatically on their music.
Yeah, Rush isn't bad. I mean, if there was going to be Rush slander, I'd be off this stream right now. But
yeah, you and me are both big fans of Rush, I think.
Oh yeah, but the thing is that I was always under the impression that analysis, education, criticism, even things like parody are protected under fair use provisions of the Copyright Act. So I still can't quite. Again, this isn't my area of expertise, but I still can't figure out like how somebody can be like, oh, your film score analysis violates this copyright. It's like, yeah, I'm not reproducing it to somebody else to try to make money on it. I'm talking about it.
Yeah, it's talking about it, and we hear some samples of what I'm talking about. All right, so here's another question. Yeah. Adam, before I move on, Adam, do you have anything to weigh in on that?
Oh, I just think maybe something regarding the when you go through the process. Maybe there's a simple solution with YouTube when you go through the claims analysis or the claims provision where you can where they just withhold ad revenue until the thing's resolved, and then release the funds. That might be a simple solution, but yeah,
it is a simple solution, and as far as I know, it's not one that actually occurs. Looking at my numbers, is that it would make total sense. Now they don't release the funds anyway because they only pay the AdSense account on the month, but it still doesn't work out. Whatever their system has, it doesn't end up working out. And then of course there's the cost of uncertainty, which is like, am I going to be able to make any money off of this kind of video or not? Right. So there's a cost to uncertainty. Anyway, I wanted to bring this one up. Now, neither of you are family lawyers, right? You guys don't do family law. Okay. No. My friend does have, oops, this is the wrong one. Here we go. My friend is currently doing her law degree. I think she wants to go into family law. She has about 2 years left. It's nearly killing her, but she's finding it difficult. Does have practical assignments where she gets to practice taking the course to the courtroom. And Film Girl, you're British, right? So the British system is a little bit different because you have a separation between standard attorneys and what are called solicitors that actually go to court. And each of those is a little bit different job. You have an attorney who prepares the case and a solicitor who just goes to court. He's a specialist with that. For anyone that doesn't know how that works. I don't know about you. You guys have opinions about U.S. family law? I know I've got.
I don't know if I should repeat them, but I've never been involved with it, thank God. But I mean,
Yeah, same.
you just kind of scan happenings. So that's, I'd like to hear your opinions on that, because I don't know if you have, I hope you've never been through the system yourself, David, but
yeah. And I intend to avoid it. Now so I know I have a lot of viewers who are more, I don't know, like red pill guys and stuff like that. And they're like, I would never get married because I don't want to get divorced. And they're afraid of this horror of divorce. I'm like, I'm not going to divorce my wife. She's not going to divorce me. And I'm betting a lot on it. Right. But, I'm pretty secure in my faith and my marriage and my wife's faith and our ability to work together. I don't really have any doubts about that, but the system's really bad. And I likened it to, it's a secret inquisitorial system. That's really what it boils down to. So we have what's called an adversarial system, which is where you have a plaintiff and a defendant, and they're both saying whatever they can to win the case. And you have some neutral party, judge and jury, that are supposed to decide it. An inquisitorial system is where the judge takes an active investigating role, asks the questions, and determines the result. Other countries have inquisitorial systems, but the family court is actually, I think I would probably upset people by calling it that. It's very much in line with an inquisitorial system, but it's secret. So you really, I don't know, it seems very disastrous to have to go through family court for that reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions involved, because it's it's the building block of your society. It's the family, and so there's husbands and wives getting divorced. There's families getting ripped apart for good reason or bad. There's the juvenile court system, if you want to lump that into family law with juvenile crime. I'm a foster parent, so I attend the foster parent, the juvenile court there for foster parents, for I don't even know how you'd word that, but I attend the court where my foster children, the biological parents' progress is being heard. So there's a lot of stuff in the family law. And to your point, David, there's because juveniles are involved, there are certain confidentiality or protections given to the minors that are not you don't see in other areas of the law. And there's also some, and I'm going to say, I say there's also some strange, and I don't, there's other hands at work with like guardian ad litems and stuff that get appointed to find out the children's best interests. And so they do, to your point, they kind of act as on their own. That's not either plaintiff or defendant. So it's family law is a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, so this is something that I figured out with family law. Is like people, a lot of men have this security in like a prenuptial agreement. They're like, I'm going to make you sign a prenup. It's like judges toss those out all the time. It's like, what? They can do that? It's like, yeah, they can. They're empowered to do that if they feel like the contract isn't fair, or if they just feel like it's not a fair contract, or the person signed it under duress, which all those things can be claimed pretty easily, then they just toss it out. And then you just proceed through the system and the law normally. Happens all the time. So anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, judges have the power to go back in time and retroactively figure out the mental state of everybody involved. It's pretty amazing. I guess you learned that in judge school. I sure didn't learn it, in my training. I don't know about you, Adam, but
no, if a judge finds that it's unfair, or if all the other standard reasons you can invalidate a contract, duress and etc., he can nullify that. Yeah. I haven't heard anything about that though, so.
Yeah, I've heard of it a bunch of times. It doesn't necessarily happen that much, but like a prenuptial agreement, most of the time, the ones that I've seen are actually what I would consider pretty fair. When, in other words, like if the spouse, if you have a poorer spouse marrying a richer spouse, let's say, because that's what most people have them. It's not like the poorer spouse is getting off with nothing. It just kind of predefines what the terms of the divorce would be when and if it happens. Like what kinds of things you're entitled to a share of and what things don't count as marital assets for that.
Yeah.
They're usually pretty fair, like including, you hear millionaires that have prenuptial agreements and their wife divorces them and they're still getting millions. And it's like, that was in the prenup. That was like stuff according to the prenup.
So
like
it's like
the Jeff. Yeah. Sorry, Adam.
No, I was just saying. So it's like it's already like a marital settlement agreement before a fair marital settlement agreement after or prior to the marriage. So
yeah,
they've
you just
already
kind of
moved
moving
out
that,
all the kinks on the front end.
Yeah, just moving that forward in time for
Yep.
if you stop loving each other or the marriage doesn't work out, you both have an amicable decision you made when you did like each other. That's, I think I've heard that expressed before. It's an agreement you make when you do like each other for the possibility that a time comes where you don't like each other. Anyway, I like this.
That's a good way
question.
of putting it.
What's your favorite portrayal of law and lawyers in fiction?
Ooh.
There's a lot.
I don't know if I have a favorite.
Ice-T is not a lawyer in SVU, is he? He's a cop.
Right? No. But it's funny you mentioned Law and Order, because I will say the first couple seasons of that, I think they get the less glamorous aspects of it pretty right. And that, at least as far as, I've gone back and watched some episodes of shows, before my time, like LA Law and things like that, right? And that's a little bit more glamorized. I think Law and Order seems to be the first that really, even more so than like Perry Mason or whatever, that really seemed to get into the nitty gritty and just the plain unfairness of the system sometimes. But again, I'm talking like the first couple seasons of that. It was pretty non-preachy. The show got unwatchable very quickly, if you ask.
Oh, we lost him for a minute there. Adam, any opinions?
Yeah, I've got two. First up, there's this book that I had to read going into criminal law, and it was called, I believe, Anatomy of a Murder. And it shows about this attorney who has to take this case, and the guy is charged with murder, and the lawyer talks to his client, and he gives him the rundown. Because of the attorney's ethical laws that prevent you from, assisting in furtherance of a crime and whatnot. So he gives the client the talk, and it's basically the attorney shows up, he tells his client to shut up, and he basically explains the law to him, and he says, this is what happens. This is what happens if you killed someone. This is the consequence. If this is some claims that or some defenses to murder, was self-defense is this, insanity is this, et cetera, et cetera. And so it goes into show, there's many layers to the book, but it goes to show the importance of discussing with your clients and the importance of following the law, and kind of how you can get to, you see those real life courtroom dramas like OJ and stuff, and or Casey Anthony, and wonder, how could Timothy McVeigh, that's a good one, and wonder, how can you defend such a person who did these things? Well, the attorney might not, the attorney might not in fact know that they did these things, and in the very real sense, though, they're supposed to represent their client and give them a fair trial. So there's that. And the second opinion I have with that portrayal of law and lawyers in fiction is, I know that there's this element of suspension of disbelief in fiction, and I get that. So I'm willing to gloss over some of the stuff when, law and lawyers and, you missed the deadline or whatnot, civil procedure. But you got to make it somewhat real. You could tell when a show does not have a legal consultant, and they they talk about, I was watching this one show and they talked about, and this might mean nothing to you guys and tell me to shut up if it's, but they were talked about a Georgia guardianship of a disabled person, and a New York court was going to override that Georgia guardianship. And so, and I'm like, that's you can tell there was no lawyer consulted for that.
Adam, do you ever find that having a legal training, basically you find yourself yelling like, "Why didn't you object?" at the TV all the time, or is that just me?
No, Alexander, I've been in court. I've been sitting. I actually watched a DUI trial, and I was sitting there with my colleague, and it was in the middle of the day. It was great. I thoroughly encourage anyone to go, if you have the time, to go and sit in a courtroom and watch what's happening, because you'll learn how the sausage is made, and it's it's not all glamorous. It's not nefarious, and it's not glamorous. This is the way life is. And the lawyers, the lawyers were good. They were doing their job. The defense was a little bit of, he had faux outrage the whole time, waving his arms and stuff. It was a bit obnoxious, but there's a handful of times I was like, oh wait, why didn't you object? So yes, I do experience that.
One of my favorite things is, when you're shooting something, you want it to be real dramatic. So you have like a lawyer stomp towards the witness and be like, the bailiff would have just like tackled him or shot him or something. You can't just like stomp over to the witness stand. Are you insane? That's why. And so like, that's one of the things about courtroom dramas that always kind of make me laugh about, just the way that they do it. You have to amp up the drama. And so it's kind of like you're watching a highlight reel of a trial. I was involved in a very lengthy and expensive trial involving wrongful death as a plaintiff. And I could tell you that, like, if I was going to turn it into a movie, the total courtroom scenes would probably add up to about 25, 45 minutes, maybe, because most of it is just like, it's really technical, boring stuff. And I remember Antonin Scalia, when he was alive, had this comment before he was on the Supreme Court. He's like, we should televise, we should record and put out everything in the Supreme Court. And he got in and he's like, no. It's like, this is super technical. This is lawyers' work, and people will not understand what the hell we're talking about. People are going to have the wrong idea of what the court is actually doing. He had this quote from Oliver, I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes. Like, dude, he's walking down the street and someone yells at him, "Do justice, Mr. Holmes." He's like, "I don't do justice. I interpret the law." That's it. And so the lawyer's work of I know, and I see this a lot because I read a lot of Supreme Court. I read a lot of Supreme Court opinions, particularly dissenting ones, which I think are really interesting to see what the lawyer who doesn't like the way, the justice who doesn't like the outcome, what he really thinks. He usually lets it rip. He could be quite angry about things. Antonin Scalia was the best. He wrote so many great dissenting opinions.
Oh, yes.
And if you could just look them up and read them, just scathing with like just attacking the people, attacking other justices, just really going to town on attorneys in the courtroom, things like that. He was great. But you get a sense there that a lot of the decisions are just completely different from what the media points them out to be. And there was this great one where I live in California. So this ended up in the United States Supreme Court. California passed an amendment to its constitution 20 years ago at this point that defined marriages between a man and a woman. And so the California Supreme Court declared that law unconstitutional. And it's a constitutional amendment that they declared unconstitutional. Wrap your head around that one. So the people who were trying to get this law passed, they ended up taking it to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said, we can't rule on this. This is a state law. We don't have jurisdiction over you. So they didn't hear the case. And it's like, this is such a victory for gay rights. It's like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? It's just, they just didn't hear the case.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Which kind of, it kind of raises a point about constitutionality in general, because if things have to get to the Supreme Court and they're the ultimate arbiters of what's constitutional and what's not, and there's all these cases they don't hear, where it takes so long for them to get a case to declare it constitutional or unconstitutional, we potentially have years, if not decades, of laws that are passed that are unconstitutional, and nobody's held accountable for them.
Yeah, in order for it to go, that the Supreme Court is not looking over the shoulder of the legislation going, there's a problem with that one. What they end up doing, there has to be a damaged party. Right. Somebody has to sue. It has to go through the entire appellate process, which is going to be multiple steps before you get to a circuit, and then before you finally get to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they have to agree to hear the case. And a lot of times they just agree; they don't agree to hear it.
Yeah,
because they only have so much. They only have so much time. I get it. It's 9 old dudes. I mean, well, 9 old people.
Yeah.
our philosopher kings and queens.
Right. It's the robes, Anybody in a black robe, they have to be smart.
Yeah. To finish up Alexandri's question, my favorite courtroom portrayals, people are going to laugh at this, but it's actually John Grisham, because John Grisham will leave out a lot of the boring parts, but have the kind of juicy parts, but they're also pretty technically correct when he actually does it. And so he knows how to really set up the drama. So you get courtroom dramas work because there's a rule set there that people understand, that there's like these rules to the court. And so the hero is playing within a set of rules to get like a strategic victory. And John Grisham really understood that when he wrote his I hate to call it legal fiction, but I can't think of another word for it.
He's a good author. I mean, he's a good author. I'm not laughing at all. I think, yeah, I agree.
All right, super chat from Mike Browning. Thank you for the $5. Are there any famous cases throughout history that you think about and wish you could have been a part of? If so, which ones and why?
Honestly, I would love to have been a part of Marbury versus Madison, which was I think it was 1803, the Supreme Court case that determined the power of the Supreme Court and how it works, because none of that's in the Constitution. That kind of just, I think he was the Chief Justice, but it was John Marshall issued the opinion and basically assumed the power of the court to declare what's constitutional and what's not. 230 whatever years later, that's the law of the land. And I would love to have been able to participate in maybe clarifying how that worked a little bit more.
What about you, Adam?
I was just going to comment on that's great because back then with that case specifically, they're talking about the interpreting the law, and they look to what the founding fathers said, and they were the founding fathers. So I always found that kind of funny.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's a lot of cases that come to mind, and there's that I believe were decided wrongly, but I don't know what the question, if I could have changed them or if I could have been a part of the losing side. Roe v. Wade is one of them. Wicker v. Filburn is another. I just think that the cases were wrongly decided based off of common law and standing precedent at that time.
Yeah. I think Roe v. Wade would be an interesting one, because I still can't quite wrap my head around how that one all shook down. I've read a number of things on it, and it just kind of baffles me how it happened. I felt like there had to be some kind of demonic ritual involved in that decision. It just makes no sense to me. Like, I haven't been able to make sense out of any of the opinions either. I'm going to go, I'm going to give one that's going to be a weird one. It's called Dudley versus Stevens. If you don't know what Dudley versus Stevens is, it's not a U.S. case. This is a British Navy case that was just extremely interesting, where basically this guy was put on trial for murder when he returned home to Britain, because they had been basically shipwrecked and killed a guy and ate him in order to survive. And so the defense that they had used before then, and in the British system, there's acceptable defenses rather than, it's just a little bit different. I can't quite articulate it right, but there's acceptable defenses. So it was acceptable defense that you could murder by necessity. So, hey, you guys are in a longboat, you're adrift at sea, you're going to die unless you eat. So somebody's got to die so everybody else can live. That's necessity. But these cases were happening. These cases were actually happening all the time in the 18th, 16th through like 19th centuries. These, the ships would get attacked by pirates and get sunk, and you'd be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with 12 dudes on a longboat and no idea where you're going. And so you'd survive via cannibalism. It was actually a very common occurrence. So what happened is this guy came back and they put him on trial for murder, and it shook out that you couldn't use necessity as a defense anymore. That he was guilty of murder for killing. They threw lots. I'm trying to remember the entire story, but they drew lots, and this young man's lot came up, and he said, the captain came over and said, "My son, I'm sorry, but it's your time." And he kills him, and they eat him. Just pretty horrific. But it was such a shocking case that I think the king or the queen ended up pardoning the people who were convicted after a year, because it was so well understood that there was just no other option but to eat somebody in order to survive. Really, really interesting case that I just think would have been really cool to witness. And it's a common law case.
Wow. What was it called again? Dudley versus
Dudley
Gilmore,
versus Stevens. Dudley and Stevens. RV Dudley and Stevens. Dudley and Stevens were the defendants, and R is the royal crown. So, or the court. You'd be in the U.S. would be the people versus Dudley and Stevens. I googled it real quick because I'm remembering it. Yeah. So it was 3 dudes. Dudley and Stevens were shipwrecked along with 2 other men. When one of them, the cabin boy Richard Parker, fell into a coma, Dudley and Stevens decided to kill him for food.
I mean, I guess that's necessity.
Yeah, and that was the defense, but that was like the end of the necessity defense in court. So everything changed after that. It was actually really a landmark decision, and you could see like repercussions from that. Once you get rid of necessity, then the next step is self-defense, an excusable reason to kill somebody. Yeah,
right, yeah.
Wow. Alexandria says he'd want to be on the OJ murder trial.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Now, I'll say something about the OJ Simpson trial. The older I get, the more I think he didn't do it. Because the more I end up having to look at the way that the evidence panned out, the things that happened, and I actually pay attention to what the defense said, I'm like, I think there was reasonable doubt.
There's a theory that he was covering for his son.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yep. It's I think I'm not going to dismiss that one out of hand. The more you learn about his son and his son's past and the kinds of actions and feelings he might have harbored for Nicole Brown Simpson,
slap the glove out of his head. Don't make him put on the glove. What were they thinking? I don't know. That was one of those courtroom moments where it's like it's almost surreal that got allowed to happen. It's like, you're going to let him put the evidence on his hand? I guess that's what happened.
David, I was in the 7th grade when that happened, so a lot of that kind of went over my head,
Yeah. I will tell you,
now,
I have a memory. I think it was the 7th grade. They wheeled in a TV. Those big. Remember the TVs on the big carts? I don't know if Adam might.
Would always bring them,
I do. Yeah. I'm younger, but I do remember that. Yes.
So they wheeled it in and turned it on, and every channel had it. So in the 7th grade, they wheeled it in so that the kids could watch this O.J. Simpson verdict. Isn't that weird? Is that not the weirdest thing? I don't know, because it was everyone talked about it all the time. Everyone's like, OJ's guilty, this and that. DNA there was DNA on it. DNA. It was just everyone was so into this case that I was in 7th grade English. They wheeled in. Everybody, I think, in the entire school had like a TV in that room, and they pulled it in from the storeroom, and we all watched the verdict. And they watched him acquit him on all the charges, and OJ Simpson smiled, and I'll never forget that moment because I didn't have to do English for that day.
Yeah. What was the reaction? Because I remember I was in computer lab and I was finishing up some kind of like test that I missed because I was absent. So I was in the room with a bunch of like third and fourth graders, so kids younger than me. And some teacher came in and told our teacher the verdict, and then like all the younger kids just erupted in spontaneous cheering. And I remember thinking, like, what the hell do you like know about this? Like, are you like, as an 8-year-old following the OJ Simpson case at home? And if so, that's kind of strange. I don't know.
My mom was actually between jobs at the time, and she watched the entire thing. Everything that they broadcast, she watched. Wow. Because of at least for part of it, because we were moving to a new city, and like there was, she just wasn't working for a couple months while we were getting ready to move. So I remember that really, really, I remember it really well. It was a very weird, surreal moment. And I do remember kids being like really excited that he got off. I'm like, I don't understand why you're excited about this. The OJ case was also one of the first times I remember fake news being a thing. That was when, I think it was Time, when they altered OJ's appearance to like make him look scarier. They like darkened his skin and made him, make him darker.
Photo,
they did all this photo manipulation to make OJ look like way scarier than he looked in that mugshot.
Should have added a curly mustache.
Yeah. So I really remember that moment. That was a turning point where I realized that like these magazines aren't telling you anything that's real. And it was the same thing with the Michael Jackson thing that happened a couple years later, where people were just like they were dropping their cereal on the floor and watching the bowl shatter because they were so upset that Michael Jackson didn't have to go to jail for touching kids. It's like he was acquitted in a court of law, Yeah. So is that an objection to the system, or are you just upset that the media told you that he was a kitty diddler for years on end?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question.
Kaku, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Lionel Hutz? He's the lawyer from The Simpsons.
Yep. Yeah.
Bourbon. I think he's brownest for the brown liquors.
He's a very accurate portrayal. I remember there's one where in the mall he's got a store called I can't believe it's a law firm. But actually, there was one really good. Getting back to the point about family law, there was one Simpsons years ago when Apu and his wife, whose name I forget, were getting divorced, and they went to a lawyer, and he said something like, by law, we're legally allowed to lift you up by your ankles and shake you and collect the loose change. It's from the landmark case Lawyers versus Freedom. And Apu and his wife eventually reconcile, and the lawyer is like, curse you humans and your feelings. And I'm like, that was one of the funniest, family law portrayals I think I've ever seen.
Here's my card. It turns into a sponge when you put it in water.
I gotta get me some of those though. That's a good idea.
Yeah, get the magnet ones and throw it on there. This also, whenever I see an ambulance go by, I start throwing my magnet cards at it.
That show used to be pretty funny. We have to.
Yeah, it used to be pretty funny. I always thought Lionel Hutz was a pretty funny thing. Thinking about family law, one of the biggest ways that you can destroy the resources you have is to get divorced, because not only does the lawyer end up collecting a lot of it, which is just how it pans. I think that's kind of how family law is designed. I think it's designed to pay lawyers, being really cynical about it. But you also end up two people living in two separate places, paying double rent. It's an easy way to, you're wealthy if you could stay married. Like I stay home with my kids all day, and I just like write books at night and talk to lawyers on YouTube, which is great. But we wouldn't be able to do that if we were divorced. We'd have to both work, which means our kids would have to be in daycare, which means they'd have a more impoverished, childhood, because they'd have less access to their parents,
Exactly.
And I'd have less money to spend on them, and my wife would have less money to spend on. They'd be way worse off if we weren't together.
And forget the financial stuff, just the impoverished in other ways too.
Yeah, just less access to mom and dad.
Exactly.
Now I've been reading all the chat, and I haven't put like every little piece of chat up here, but there was one that I wanted to point out. It's like people who aren't the father's getting judgments against them in family law. This actually happens, and there's a couple cases that I remember happening here in California, because what you can do in California is they can start taking wages out of your paycheck if they think you owe child support, with no, like, they don't have to tell you. So I think I read about it in Reason magazine. Actually, it's dude started losing money out of his paycheck. He's like, "What's going on?" It's like, "Well, you know, there was a family court judgment against you in absentia." It's like, "What?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, you were listed as the father of this child." He's like, "I've never had a kid," and so went to the, finally dug through it, and the mom was like, "He's not the father. This other guy, I'm a name like, Adam Jones."
I've heard that. Yeah,
and so it took a year to get his wages to stop being garnished by the state, and they never gave him the money back, because according to the law, once that money gets taken out, it belongs to the kid. They don't have to refund it. It's like, it's in the best interest of the kid. He lost like $30,000 worth of wages
that's just
to a kid that everyone agreed wasn't his. The mom said it wasn't his. Everyone knew it wasn't his.
Yeah, but you don't see her cutting a check to reimburse the guy.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
Sorry about
unbelievable.
that.
Yeah, I actually came up with a book story that was based on that, where I had and I'll probably come out with it at some point here. I have to finish writing it. But, a guy's a romance writer, and all of a sudden he finds, he owes $100,000 in back child support. So he thinks he has this kid that is an illegitimate kid from when he was in college. And it turns out it's not his kid, but that's kind of the impetus, is like, what? They just took all my money. What happened?
Yeah.
Because you could do that in California.
Yeah. I think I read that class, because I took one of the things that scared me off of doing family laws. I took a family law class, and just like, it was just case after case of just horror stories. And I'm like, I don't know what I would do if I had to do this for a living. I was like, I learned a valuable lesson, that semester, like what not to do.
Yeah. How realistic is Ben Matlock as a character? I think he's an okay character, but showing up and having a dramatic courtrum scene every single week is probably not realistic.
That
might happen once in your life.
Said, yeah. Yeah, but every day, that's some kind of record.
Here's a good one. If there were no copyright laws, how could creators make money? I could tell you that. It'd be through things like Patreon. It'd be the new patron model, which Brian Niemeyer talks about, which is you have patrons that pay you. And once the art is out there, it's just out for people to have. It belongs to society. And people that want that art to exist have to be willing to pay you ahead of time. Neo-patronage is what Brian calls it. And he thinks it's really the future of what we're doing here. And I can see that, because it may become really impractical to try to be enforcing copyright the way that we have it now.
True, but all the same, it's good to have it there so somebody can't buy a bunch of David V. Stewart's books and then try to pass them off as their own or sell them on their own. I think the fact that we have the laws it helps prevent egregious things like that from going on. Not to disagree with your point. I think the neo-patronage is kind of where it's at, especially considering, let's say you have you're published by one of the big 5 or maybe it's 4 now. You're going to get your advance, and that's about that. You have no guarantee that you're actually going to get, are they going to market for you? Is your book going to get in the hands of readers? Is anybody even going to buy it? Are you going to make any money on that? Whereas with this model that Brian's kind of been spearheading, you're connected directly with people that for a fact want to give you money for what you have to offer, and that's I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. What? Any opinions, Adam?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's, you guys already hit the point, but it's back in the days of Olda, if you will, when people needed to support the creators just for basic living, to create their art, and then everyone could benefit from it. So
yeah, if we go back to the 18th century, music's my specialty. You had rich basically rich lords that had private musicians that they paid. They were patrons of the arts. They would pay to have an opera put on, and the composer would write the opera, write the piece, knowing that like once it's written, it's pretty much anyone can now play that piece because there's no practical way to enforce any kind of intellectual property. Beethoven actually used to really exploit this, where he would sell the rights to publish his music to like multiple publishers. He'd be like, you have the rights and you have the right. And then they'd all, none of them would make any money after they paid him. But they couldn't sue him over it because they didn't really have those laws in Germany at the time.
I like that.
In Austria at the time.
It's funny you bring up classical music because, talk about, copyrights. That's one of the things that's, kind of killed modern orchestral music. Why do most philharmonic orchestras play? It's great music, but they're playing the Brahms, the Beethoven, the Mozart, the things like that. They're not paying new composers. Well, the thing is you have to pay the new composer, right?
Yeah. Well,
or you could wait till they're
wait till they're dead. Well, there's two layers to that. So the first one is, you have to pay new composers. So orchestras would be happy to commission new works, but it costs money. It costs thousands of dollars to commission a new work. The other problem is that, and I've talked to many orchestra directors who will say this: if you're not playing Beethoven, Bach, or Brahms, no one's coming. Right. Those are the names people know. It's kind of like that has to be the headline. Now you can play some new music, but you also have to pay. You also got to play something by Brahms or something by Bach, something that people are interested in seeing from the classical repertoire. Third problem is most new music coming out of the academy sucks, and it's sucked for about 100 years. So there's great composers out there, and they just are not working with orchestras. Maybe they're film composers. Maybe they're they're operating in a genre. That's how it is. Like most academic music is aleatoric garbage. Where it's like, I'm going to throw. My first composition teacher, he literally did this. He would put rice in ink. He'd have a thing of ink, and then he'd throw the rice at a giant piece of staff paper on the wall, and wherever the rice hit, that was the notes.
That sounds like John Cage.
Yeah, it's like John Cage. It's randomness, and so it's like, oh well, the music can just arise out of the randomness, like the earth arose out of chaos in the before time.
That's not music. I mean,
right?
It doesn't come out sounding the best. So audiences don't like it.
I don't know. I don't know how you feel about the Austrian school, the 12-tone type of stuff. Schoenberg and Alban Berg and all that. Like at least some of that they at least try to have like a consistent through line through the music or a melody or something like that. It might not be pleasing to everybody's ears, but I like to think that they were at least trying to, make something people would kind of enjoy. But beyond that, I'm with you. I concede the point. Most of it's just terrible.
Any opinions, Adam? I don't know if you're
Yeah, well, not. I mean, I was in band in high school, but that's about as far as. No, I took from what I remember in college is I took a music history class, and it was kind of like what you guys said, is that it sounds like everything was really great. And then we got to the 20th century, and it was just the small m modern music was just trash. I don't know. It was, just like echoes or just weird disjointed stuff that didn't make any sense.
Well, real music from the time of the ancients up until 1900 was based on the mathematical relationships between pitches, and rhythm is just their relationships over time. And so you're organizing mathematical relationships between sounds over time. That's music. That's been the basis for music theory up until Schoenberg. And Schoenberg was like, well, I'm going to take the 12, my piano's not by me anymore. It's like behind me. But, I'm going to take the 12 notes, and I'm just going to create a system that makes them all equal in importance. Well, in the tonal system, that's not how it works. The tonic is the most important. But so he created a system that did that, and you hear it and you're like, this sounds awful. It's because you're not hearing any mathematical relationships between pitches. The purpose was to eliminate the natural math that exists in music that we respond to. Our physiology, and indeed to me, our souls are programmed to respond to that godly, perfect mathematical relationships, and the tension between them, between the imperfect, the what we perceive of as dissonances, those pitches which are not related mathematically or very distantly, and moving towards consonants which are closely related. That's music, and it's something that is completely mathematical. It's completely harmonious with nature. Schoenberg changed all of that, and I have a certain appreciation for Schoenberg's music, but most people don't like it. They have Adam's response to it. It sounds disjointed, dissonant, loud, can't follow anything. That's by design. It's designed to be anti-melodic and anti-harmonious. It's a perfect example of the modern. We're going to
if you want to hear another good example of I think of unlistenable is what's his name, Pierre Boulez.
Pierre Boulez.
I don't know. Yeah. Boulez, sorry, I don't know. I hear my French is terrible. I don't know what it's called in I can't pronounce it in French, but it translates to the hammer without a master. I had somebody recommend that, and it just, to me, it's like 11 minutes of audio torture. I just, and you're talking to a guy that likes Stravinsky, and I just can't deal with Boulez. I just,
because Stravinsky didn't try to eliminate music theory. He was very into working outside of what the normal confines and comfort zones of people were. If you listen to any of Stravinsky's music, especially the popular stuff like Rite of Spring is not like atonal garbage. It's supposed to be primal and frightening. He went with the effect in mind. Stravinsky was actually very competent and knew. Yeah. You have to know he was a student of Rimsky-Korsakov, who's a brilliant composer as well. You have to know what you're doing to rebel against it. It's kind of like free jazz. Dudes who are jamming, if you're like, I'm going to go over to their house and jam, it's like, you're not playing free jazz. Because I played free jazz. I played with dudes who knew music theory and music so well that we could just play without having to have chord changes. That's all free jazz is, Anyway, I like this question. What do you guys think of the presidential impeachment? I forgot it was happening.
Adam?
Yeah. No, I kind of forgot what was happening. I've been coming off a cold this past couple days. So no, just in generally, one of my colleagues that I work with, he has a great idea about a standing impeachment committee in Congress that serves as a constant check on the executive. And I thought it was a pretty neat idea, since we have these separations of power and checks and balances. What better mode to have than a standing impeachment inquiry? I don't know. Idea. I thought it was good. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea.
Any opinions, Alexander?
I could get behind that.
A standing, you like the idea of it?
I think it's good. I like the idea of a standing impeachment inquiry. I mean, I think I understand. I forgot who asked the question, but that's a good point about the fact that there's term limits now. So how necessary is it? And I don't know, anything that can, because it's not just presidents that can get impeached. I think judges can get impeached. I think you can even impeach members of Congress, things like that. Yeah. I think, don't quote me on that, Adam. You might know more than that, but I think anything that can potentially remove a bad actor from public office should be
probably a good thing.
Enshrined, but probably a good thing, except when, like we see now. I mean, I don't want to wade into the weeds because I haven't been following it, but I still can't tell what the, high crime or misdemeanor was, but
Yeah. I view impeachment. So, I mean, the question, I clicked away from it to the super chat, which I appreciate. I appreciate Mike, the super chat a lot.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So we could talk. I like My Cousin Vinny. I thought that was a fun movie, and I really liked how the judge berated him for wearing leather in the courtroom. That was just really hilarious.
They showed us that in Civ Pro, actually.
He's like, get out of here and get yourself a suit. It was great. But as far as the purpose of impeachment, 8 years somebody can do a lot in 8 years, and the executive branch is very powerful. It's more powerful now really than it's ever been. I think impeachment in general is a good thing. I think the current impeachment, I have no idea what it's about. I think it's just a political thing. So we say high crimes and misdemeanors, but high crimes and misdemeanors is up to Congress. So if high crimes and misdemeanors involve slamming your phone down too harshly, then so be it, because that's what Congress has decided. So it's Congress is the arbiter, not some sort of law as far as high crimes and misdemeanors. That's why it's intentionally vague, is so that it could you could just make it kind of whatever you need it to be. If you have a bad political actor, even if they haven't violated the law, maybe it's okay to get rid of them, you know? I don't think Congress ever really has the will to kick a president out, though. They just never seem to do that. It's too many. Maybe it's because it's like, you know, but what if I'm in that office? What if they kick me out? You know?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that
what if my
implies
party's in?
that implies a certain level of self-reflection on the part of these people, though, David, which I'm not convinced exists. You know?
Yeah, I think this current one's just a political exercise. I have no idea what the high crime or the misdemeanor is. I was kind of hoping as more stuff shook out, like you'd get more declassifications of things. It would be interesting, but I haven't seen anything interesting come out of it.
It seems a lot of Adam Schiff, and that's about it. So
yeah. Oh well, you know, it's just a political maneuver. I think most people know that. I think a lot of people are bored by it because there's just nothing at stake there. I think it was more interesting with Clinton because you had that whole salacious affair thing, and a lot of people thought he was being impeached over this affair.
Yeah,
and it was over perjury. And Ron Paul wanted to impeach him over war crimes or war power violations because he bombed Kosovo. I think just kind of was like, oh yeah, let me just go ahead and bomb this country. Make sure you guys stop talking about my affair here.
Right around Easter, if I remember correctly, too. Which is kind of
oh boy, yeah, I remember that. Oh,
yeah,
let's bomb them on Easter. Good Lord,
I know.
it feels like such an insult to me to do something like that, but it'd be like bombing a country on like Ramadan, you know, or like another holy day. Whatever. It's like, let's go ahead and bomb them on Passover. It's like,
why?
Bombing on Christmas. Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we have to take action.
Okay.
So what action do you need to take on Christmas? I don't know, but we're going to blow up this wedding.
Oh, we shouldn't laugh, but
if you don't laugh, you'll cry. I'll quote Lemmy on that. Lemmy always used to say that if you don't laugh, people are always like, why is Lemmy such a jokester and writes serious music? He's like, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So you just can't take everything seriously, or it's just too much to bear.
Yep.
My Cousin Vinny, Devil's Advocate. Any other opinions on that? Two lawyers who work perfectly in their respective stories. I liked My Cousin Vinny. I like The Devil's Advocate as well.
I never saw Devil's Advocate. I did see
I
My
haven't
Cousin
seen Devil's Advocate.
Vinny. Yeah.
So, okay, Devil's Advocate is a great story about the descent into madness. You know, it's as the story progresses, you become less and less sure about what reality is, and it becomes more and more about like temptations, and you start to really believe that Al Pacino's character is the devil, is Satan. And that Keanu Reeves's character is going through some sort of test of his soul. His soul's being tested, and he's being, you know, like God's allowing the devil to torture and tempt him, like with Christ or with Saint Anthony or any of these historical figures. And he comes out correct at the end. You know, he preserves his soul.
Okay.
But that's the temptation, is the temptation of power. Like it's actually a really cool movie. I don't know. Yeah, I'd need to watch it again to do a full analysis, but it's great with the descent into madness. It was actually very inspiring for me to think about a story that as you progress further into it, you are less able to understand reality. I actually did that with this book, Eyes on the Walls. This is the last book I came out with. This one has a really strong descent into madness in a literal way. The kid in it ends up on psychiatric meds. He's having visions of monsters. And if you go read the reviews, everybody says, I didn't see the ending coming. And that's the reason you didn't see the ending coming, is because you were totally in the madness and thought that you had like a grip on what was actually happening. Everything was different from what you thought. Nice. You start thinking there's two binary possibilities, and there's actually more than that. And then not only is there more than that, but all of them are true. So this is a good book. Please check it out. It's 99 cents for the ebook, and it's a short book. You can read it in 2 hours, just like watching a movie. So I did use that one a lot. So I like Devil's Advocate quite a bit for that reason.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'll have to read the book and check out that movie now.
Yeah, this is a good book. So, you know, I might start giving this one away on the mailing list, because I think it's a cool book that people could really like. It's definitely horror genre, monster genre kind of stuff.
Nice. No lawyers?
You know what? There's, I don't think there's any lawyers. I think there's just there's like the DA in like half a scene, like walking through, it's mostly about the detectives. The cops are there, but your interactions are with the detectives. And one of the characters is a detective named Sal who, I don't know. I just imagine him as this just like very straightforward masculine force in this very kind of loose environment where nothing really seems certain, especially with the main character, the kid. Cool. So there's some detectives in it. There's no lawyers. I don't know if I've written the sequel to this book actually has lawyers in it in a legal system I invented. So the next one's called Tyrant's Gallow. Is the next book that'll come out this year, and there are lawyers in it, but the lawyers are basically on a pirate island. So it's all pirates. So it's a whole story of pirates, but they're pirate lawyers.
Now you're speaking my language, David. Pirate lawyers. Man,
yeah, so it's
lawyers. It's like
it's a legal system.
Write it faster.
It's a legal system that like all of these freebooters use, because there's lots of. It's run by the banks, basically. The banks are the legal system because they can enforce contracts and they can hold. You can hold deposits and things like that. So the government of this pirate island is the courthouse. The courthouse and the bank are the same institution because they could do all the money guarantees and the legal guarantees, and they have the ability to enforce contracts because they.
And you said this is fiction?
Yeah.
No, I said you said this is fiction with the with the banks owning the
the courts.
That's enough cynicism, I guess. But.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if there's anything else interesting, and then we should probably think about hanging it up here. Let me go ahead and I'm going to link Adam's website again in case you want to hop on his mailing list, since he does have a book coming up here. And I'm going to link his Twitter, and I'll link Alexander's Twitter as well.
Thank you.
And I think I have your website.
Yeah, thank you.
I like Alexander's blog quite a bit. I read it. It's one of the blogs I do read a lot, not just because he's a Rush fan, but that helps. I really like Rush. Rush is actually one of my favorite bands.
They're so good.
And it was interesting when Neil Peart died, I didn't really have an emotional reaction to it, except I'm like, yeah, that Neil Peart were dying. That's how we'd find out. He just wouldn't tell anyone. He hated that kind of attention. He wouldn't want anyone to be wishing him well. He'd want to be left the hell alone and for his death to be a surprise. I'm like, that's exactly what Neil Peart would do.
I will say this is the only celebrity death I've ever actually felt anything about. Usually you're like, oh, that's too bad, that's sad, that I don't know, but with Neil Peart, it was like, what? The drummer from Rush? It was, I don't know why, but and I actually I guess I'll talk about it here. I'm going to be soliciting feedback from a lot of people, probably you too, David, soon, but I want to write something about why Rush seems like more than just a silly rock band to so many people. And that's one of the things that it made me think about, like, why do I care about this musician I've never met dying so much? Why does this band, why has it meant so much to me, in my life? I've been listening to them for, 25 years or something like that. Yeah. So I don't know. It was just, that was definitely, it's just something interesting to think about, like strangers in a very Neil Peart-ish thing to worry about too. Like, why would a stranger's life affect you like that? But, I think he touched a lot of people. So, even though he was like this very private individual, I don't think he could escape the, I guess, the adulation. He's a very interesting cat he was. Yeah.
That reminds me I saw them on tour. I think it was on the Snakes and Arrows tour. They actually, on one of the other legs of it, they played Moving Pictures in its entirety, like front to back, which was a kind of a big selling
I missed
point.
that.
I got to see it. I saw them at the MGM Grand. It was a great show. And nice. That was when I really decided Snakes and Arrows might have actually been their best album. It was when I heard them play all the songs live. And I'm like, man, these are great songs. I can't believe that a band recording for 50 years can still come out with such great songs. But
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
great,
yeah.
and
And
I really
they played most of that on that tour.
yeah, I felt really like I felt a lot of emotion connected to those songs because of how well they came out live. But Neil Peart said he always felt embarrassed to play Limelight live, even though it was a big hit song. He goes, it's too arrogant, you know? Like, imagine me telling my problems to somebody, you know, being like, oh, it sucks to be famous. It's like, how annoying is that? So he never really felt comfortable playing the song because of the lyrics he wrote for it. But they played it on that tour, so it was good to see it. I guess they hadn't really played it much over the previous 30 years. Which is surprising. Okay, anything else, Adam, before we say goodbye? I missed a lot of questions, by the way, guys. It's just there's too much to talk about and not enough time.
I just one little tidbit here to that the My Cousin Vinny with the leather suit that he had on. In my county, the local rules prohibit headwear for men, but specifically allow women's Sunday hats or something. It's something very weird specific. Women's dress hats are allowed, but men's hats are not. So it's very read the local rules.
Yeah, there are local rules for that, which can be quite funny. I had a lawyer, a student of mine once, that used to like wearing cufflinks. He always wore all these cufflinks. He's like, juries just think cufflinks are really cool. I'm like, well, that makes sense. He goes, but there's places you can't wear them. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, there's cufflinks are prohibited in some courts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah. For somebody somewhere decided cufflinks would be a bad thing to wear. I'm like, I had no idea. But there's dress codes and things like that sometimes.
Yeah.
In certain localities.
It also could. I seem to remember a lot of spy movies where like cufflinks hide, like an explosive charge or a hidden camera or something.
Like pull that cufflink off and throw it.
I'm sure that's what they were concerned about. Yeah.
All right. So I guess that's going to be it. I really appreciate everybody coming and watching Breaking the Law and talking about law and just talking about fiction too. So I might have Adam and Alexander back on another time to talk fiction instead of no law allowed. And we won't even mention that anyone's an attorney, and then we'll just talk about stuff we like, like space opera, because I think
that sounds good.
Yeah. So Alexander's most recent book, your most recent book is Last Ancestor, right?
Right.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and link it here.
Cool.
Thank you. What would you classify this book as? Planetary romance?
Called kind of. I'm thinking more Sword and Planet mixed with the Thundercats and other 80s type of adventure stories. So it's sort of my love letter to the kind of stuff I liked that was coming out when I was a kid, but also a love letter to the stuff I'm rediscovering, like your Edgar Rice Burroughs, your Jack Vance, a lot of the older, I guess pre-1980. I was born in 81, so that's obviously my starting point. But I'm trying to combine the 80s stuff with this other stuff I've been, recently discovering. So, freaky aliens, sword fights, gun battles, a race of dogmen, and so there you go.
Maybe next time we'll talk about Edgar Rice Burroughs. Good old ERB. There's a lot to talk about there, and there's a huge genre that has existed in that for like 100 years. That's still very popular and probably deserves more attention rather than the latest kind of post-Tolkien schlock fantasy. By the way, I write fantasy books. You can get this one for free for joining my mailing list. Water of Awakening. All right. So thanks so much, guys. Thanks for joining me. And thank you to Adam and Alexander. And we will see you guys.
Thank you, David. A lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah.